Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Huntress Malted Teacake live video. I am Annabel. I am the CEO and founder of Nc'nean, and this is Matt. And I will let Matt introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I am Matt Hastings. I am the blender at Nc'nean, among with a host of other jobs, because we are a teeny tiny company and everyone has to do a little bit of everything. Annabelle also undersold her importance and job roles. Because we'd be here forever if we listed everything we have to do, yeah.
So I'm very excited about this evening, Matt. I think we should just give people a few minutes to join. And we
Most
can
certainly.
Get glasses poured of whiskey, everybody, because we definitely need to have some whiskey in front of us. Oh, hello. Yes, please put comments in the chat. Tell us where you are, whether you've got some Huntress Malted Teacake with you, who else is with you, how excited you are about tonight. I love that. Love seeing where everybody is.
Most definitely. I believe we've got some friends joining us from the delightful Usk Valley Whiskey Club. There should be a whole evening crew because we've managed to pick the day of the week that they normally meet upon. So hi everyone at Usk Valley. It's been a little while since I've seen you all. I hope you enjoy the secondary tasting tonight after this first more important one.
Exactly. Let us know, Usk Valley, when you're here. Hello to the person from Norway. I can't read what your name is because that is a great collection of letters in your handle, but please tell us who you are.
But from the lovely Nc'nean, who are an awesome little distillery.
Exactly, who we love. I'm very excited to be spending some time with Huntress Malted Teacake. Just before we came live, Matt and I were saying how busy we have been at Nc'nean since this launched. We haven't had that much time to just sit down and appreciate it. So it's always good to have an hour to do that. Hi, Anne.
I am also very excited to sit in my shed and drink whiskey for an evening rather than doing any real grown-up work. It's,
Exactly. What's not to love?
Indeed. Oh, now we have lots of friends joining in. So hello, people in Scotland and Germany, and
lots from Germany, Norway. This is great. Well, just while we wait for a few more people to join, let me tell you what I thought we could do this evening. I will give you a little bit of an intro to Nc'nean. I know some of you know Nc'nean really well, but others of you will be new. So I'll just give you a little bit of a history. And I'll talk then a little bit about what Huntress, which is the whiskey we're talking about tonight, is all about and how that fits into our mission and our ethos. And then I'm going to hand over to Matt to talk about how he created the whiskey and explain why we have so many baked goods beneath our pictures on the screen this evening. Please get involved in the chat, whether you want to share tasting notes, ask questions, whatever it is, put it in there. We'll answer some questions as we go along, but we will also come back to any questions that we haven't answered at the end, and yeah, have a little bit of time then for FAQs. So let me get started with a bit of Nc'nean history. So for those of you that don't know, I used to be a strategy consultant in London in a very, you could say boring, or you could say high-powered corporate job, which was long hours and maybe lacked some purpose to my mind. And the idea for Nc'nean, I always get asked, how did you end up starting a whiskey distillery on the west coast of Scotland from that start? And I always say there's two reasons. The first is the location. It's on my family's farm. And so I guess that provided the original inspiration. It is, for those of you that don't know, a very, very remote, beautiful part of Scotland. Very wild, very natural. Perhaps not the most practical place to build a distillery, but we are just across the water from Tobermory Distillery. We have Ardnamurchan to the north and Oban to the south, and I always say you can't be on the west coast around there and not think about whiskey. Oh look, we've got James from Usk Valley Whiskey Club joining now. Hello.
Hi James, hi Tim.
Nice to have you all. Hello also to Bulgaria, that's fantastic, and Mull.
Slightly less distance to travel from Mull to the distillery.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I guess that the location was the original inspiration, and I got the chance to take some time off from that job in 2012, and I said to my family that I could maybe try and do some research on this whiskey distillery idea that we had for a long time but not done much about. And so I set about writing a business plan. And some of that was very boring PowerPoints and Excels, but I also obviously had to do a lot of competitor research, and that involved falling in love with whiskey as a drink. That was really how I fell in love with it. But it also involved a little trip to Islay to go and see some distilleries. And obviously it's not only a very famous whiskey island, but there's lots of distilleries in close proximity. So off I went. And that consolidated for me a kind of real mission for what Nc'nean would become. And there were really two parts of that. The first is sustainability. Now, this is something that's very important to me personally. And what I observed, and this was back in 2012, going around a lot of the distilleries on Islay, is that there wasn't anyone else really thinking about this. It seemed in the whiskey industry, it's obviously a very energy intensive process. No one included anything in their tours about what they were going to do from a sustainability point of view or what they were doing. And I felt that I would like to change this in order, to make the world a better place, but also knowing that the next generation of consumers really care about this. And if we're going to have Scotch thriving in 100 years' time, we need to address this issue. So that became a very core pillar to Nc'nean. And for those of you that know Nc'nean, you will know just how important it is to us. But there was another part to that mission as well. And because we have this wonderful tradition in Scotland of making Scotch for many, 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 many decades, there are a fantastic number of distilleries doing things very traditionally. But what there didn't seem to be was anyone thinking about a kind of modern take on Scotch. And what if we start a new distillery now? What might that look like? What could we do differently? And that seemed like both a fun opportunity, but also something that might help, Scotch continue thriving for the next 100 years as well. So those two things of sustainability and innovation became the two central pillars to Nc'nean, and that has remained our mission to this day, which is now 13 years later. So that was my sabbatical. I had to go back to my old job, but I finally left in mid-2013 and started setting up the distillery. We fundraised for 2 years, we built for 2 years, and we started distilling in January 2017. At that point, I baked in a lot of our sustainability missions to what we do. So we've been 100% organic since the start. That means we only use 100% organic Scottish barley. We've only ever used renewable energy. We use biomass to power the distillery, and that biomass, i.e. timber, comes from a forest just around the corner. We recycle all of our cooling water through a cooling pond, which is 80 to 90% of a typical distillery's water usage. And we recycle all of our waste to the land where we are. And all of those principles were baked in from the beginning. Of course, you have to wait for whiskey. So we had a lovely period of 3 years where I developed our botanical spirit, which is a kind of gin whiskey hybrid. And we settled into the production, and then we got to release our first whiskey in 2020, which is when Matt joined the team, of course, in the middle of COVID. Not exactly how I'd envisaged it, having been working on this project for 7 years by that point, but we did it, and here we are today. And along the way, we have kept that focus on innovation and doing things differently. And for Nc'nean and us, that means thinking about the spirit. My observation is that thinking about casks has been a real focus of the industry over the last few decades. but there hasn't been so much focus on the spirit side, and that really interests me. It interests me philosophically and intellectually, but it also is practically of interest if you're a new distillery. Because if you're a new distillery, the casks are naturally going to have a lot less impact on the whiskey you put out there than if you're releasing a 20-year-old whiskey. So it is extra important for a new distillery. We were lucky enough to work with Dr. Jim Swan in developing the distillery and developing our liquid. He was a kind of grandfather of the Scotch industry, was incredibly well known, and one of his specialities was helping new distilleries develop an absolutely delicious new make spirit. And I think his passion for the new make spirit contributed towards a lot of the work we've done in that area. Now, what does that actually mean in practice? Partly that just means spending a lot of time and literally money making a really delicious new make spirit in the first place. So whether that's buying organic barley, using 2 yeasts in all of our fermentations, fermenting for a really long time. So our fermentations are between 68 and 114 hours, distilling super slowly and taking a really high cut on the spirit run. But it also means looking at other sources of flavor creation. And that is where the Huntress series comes in. Oh, thanks, James. Best new make I've ever tasted.
I can live with that.
We think so too, by the way, but thank you. It's always nice when other people say that as well. But really, that is what we're trying to create. Something that is so delicious that if you like new make, which I do, not everyone, but I do, you want to drink it straight off the still. And unusually for lots of distilleries in Scotland, we serve the new make as part of our tours. That is how proud we are of it. But, you know, making the same spirit all year round is a little bit boring. And Gordon, who is our distillery manager, who came from Diageo, was a little bit shocked when I started to suggest making different new makes, because that's definitely not the way of doing things at larger distilleries. But we are independent and we have the flexibility to play around with flavour. So right from the beginning of Nc'nean, we have done what we call yeast experiments. And that is where we either replace one of our 2 yeasts or we add a 3rd yeast to what we make. And that is with the aim of creating different flavours. And Matt can talk a little bit more about how we do that. But not only do we do that, we also make a separate new make, which is destined for long maturation. So effectively, we have 3 new makes we make in the year. Our flagship new make, which goes into most of our bottlings, our experimental period, and then this long maturation product. And those have given us a great breadth of things to play around with under this kind of innovation pillar that we have. And that is where the Huntress series comes in. So we launched this, I think, in 22 for the first time. And it is the home, if you like, in our range of all these experimental creations that we make. And when we do these experiments, we don't necessarily know which Huntress it's going to go in. We don't even know if it's going to be a success. Some of these experiments take a really long time to be ready, and some of them are ready really quickly. And the one that we're talking about this evening is one of the really quick, really great early ones. So I will hand over to Matt to talk a little bit more specifically about Huntress Malted Teacake, but maybe also a bit about how we do those yeast experiments.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That's a very good introduction, very thorough. So, as we've already said, this Huntress series is all about showcasing the experimental side of what we do at the distillery. So we do dedicate 10% of production per year to these experiments, but they are specifically spirits experiments. So if you go to any reasonably good bottle shop and there's a big selection on the shelf, you'll have a single distillery and they'll have multiple expressions, all different colors, all different fun stuff, but almost always the variable quality, the variable quantity, between each of those releases is always to do with maturation. It's either how old is this whiskey or in what kind of cask did we mature this whiskey in, which is one way of looking at flavor, but there didn't seem to really be any focus on what you can do right at the beginning, how you can change the flavor, change the profile of your spirit by paying attention to those early stages of production. So by looking at your barley, your malting, your yeast strains, your fermentation times, your cut points in the still, you can change one of those variables and it can have an enormous impact on the finished whiskey. This particular release, Huntress Malted Teacake, is a fermentation trial, and it is one of the, let's say, one of the more normal ones that we do, and that this is which is very unusual for the rest of the industry. This is a triple pitched yeast recipe. So there are 3 different commercial strains of yeast in there that we've put in during the fermentation phase, obviously to build up alcohol. That's the main reason that we do this, but also to build up flavor. Now we have the 2 yeast strains that we normally use at Nc'nean, the Anchor and Fermentus. So we have there a distiller's yeast that gives us the yield that we're after. We have the high ester yielding yeast that gives us all of the juicy fruits and the texture and the richness that we associate with Nc'nean. And then in this instance, Huntress Malted Teacake also contains the delightfully named Double Trouble from WHC Yeast Propagators, who are based in Ireland. They are a wonderful yeast company that produces a wide range of different yeasts for all sorts of different applications, but notably a very big range of very exciting, very interesting brewer's yeasts. And this is the main reason why we wanted to experiment in this space, because fermentation broadly in the Scotch whisky industry has changed massively over the last 50, 80 years, and has steadily become kind of more standardized, more about efficiency, more about making sure that we can get the maximum amount of alcohol in the shortest amount of time. But historically in Scotch whisky, this is where a lot of flavor and a lot of character in the spirit was built up by using different yeast strains, often brewer's yeasts that are slightly lower ethanol yielding, slightly lower alcohol yielding, but working just as hard and producing just as much stuff, just not necessarily the booze that we desire. But in this case, it's what we loosely call secondary metabolites. What we mean is flavor. So different esters, aldehydes, phenols, all the fun stuff. And this particular expression, using this Double Trouble, the pun is that it's a beer yeast that's normally designed for Abbey style beers, Trappist, Belgian ales, those kind of higher ABV, but ultimately more malty, more rich versions of Belgian beer. And by changing just a small amount of the yeast recipe here, so we've taken out half of the high ester yielding yeast, half of the fruity yeast, and replaced it with this beer yeast, and it's created something that is even, I'd say, fuller and richer and chewier. There's loads of those like dark fruit flavors, like very figgy is the big one that really strikes me, because 1, it's a delicious flavor, but 2, it's normally a flavor that we associate with things that are very like heavily sherry cask influence, or something that's much kind of more sweet and dark and more can't think of the right word, but just like heavier is the fuller is maybe what I'm thinking.
Absolutely. It really
whereas
does.
In this case, it's our lighter spirit that shines through here, matched with those figgy flavors, is such a wonderful combination, because we're getting that figginess, but in a very bright, fresh, refreshing kind of way, which is super fun. And one of my main loves for this particular release, obviously we do a new Huntress release every year based off of the experimental periods that we've run since we started production in 2017. And whilst we try and keep the recipe fairly standard, the liquid itself ends up changing quite drastically based off of just when that experiment's ready. It's one of the joys of making single malt Scotch whisky is that because of the strict rule set and the quality, it's never bad, but it can be not ready. And there are some of these releases that take a really long time to come around. And when they do, it's magical, because you've gone through this period of tasting them year on year. And every time it's like, they're not quite ready, they're not quite ready. And then all of a sudden it all comes together and falls into place. For this particular release, I remember being in the warehouse with a couple of storied industry friends, and we were tasting this just because they were very interested in the use of brewer's yeast for making single malt Scotch whisky. At the time, this liquid was a year and a half old, and we were all enamored with it, infatuated. It's so delicious. It was so well-rounded and accomplished, even before it was legally whiskey, that we knew this is one of the ones that was going to turn around very, very quickly. And that's a nice juxtaposition to have against our previous Huntress release, which was the oldest yeast experiment that we'd ran, the champagne yeast from 2017, that took a very, very long time to come around, because that high acidity just took forever to mature out and turn into something wonderful and floral and bright. In this case, we had something that was ready almost immediately. And it's real nice from sort of my personal journey of working with Nc'nean. I remember the first time I got to taste some of the liquid. Annabel had bought a 2-litre can of whiskey into the whiskey bar that we were in to make some cocktails with, and I remember tasting it and just being blown away. I was like, I can't comprehend or understand what Nc'nean is doing at this stage, because I hadn't heard of it. I didn't know what the focus was.
Which
but
you should say, Matt, was
liquid.
which was back in what, 2019?
December 2019, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So this was before it was whiskey.
Yeah, so it would have been 2.5 years old, and I was blown away. And it's nice now, having a few years under our belt, being a little bit more established, having had whiskey out for the last 6 or so years, and getting to release something again that it's a 3-year-old whiskey. This is 95% a 3-year-old spirit, and in tasting it, it's so round, well incorporated, easy drinking, full, delicious. It's a real showcase of that ethos that we have, which is spirit quality first, making something that is truly phenomenal as soon as possible, really.
We've got a little question here from Jim Matt.
Oh, wonderful. So I love the Orchard Cobbler release. Thank you very much. Also very good. This is wonderful too. Are all the Huntress releases in cask for 3 years, or are they in cask longer? So as I said, they vary, and it depends on when the whiskey is ready. So Huntress Lemon Meadow was 7 years old by the time it had come round and turned into something delicious. That was another triple pitch yeast recipe, but using the champagne yeast, produced a spirit that was very tasty, very floral, but much higher in acidity than we were expecting. And that acidity took a really, really long time to esterify, that's not the word, but become an esters and turn into these delicious flavors. Before that, it tastes a little disjointed, it tastes a little out of balance, and then all of a sudden one day it clicked and the casks were delicious, and that's when we used it. So that was a much older release. This particular one, Malted Teacake, is back at 3, much like the first Huntress release that we would have done for 2022. The rum yeast experiment was also a 3-year-old whiskey. So yeah, there's no defined, we're going to always aim for this age within the series, because it's all unknown territory. It's all experiments that nobody else in the industry has really run before.
Although I would add, Matt, that I think as we've gone through this journey of doing these yeast experiments, there's 2 things that have changed. One is that we have got better at identifying, because when we run these yeast experiments, we do it literally in a bucket to begin with. So we take the wort, so the sugary water that comes off the mash tun before it goes into a fermentation vessel, and we ferment at bucket size. That is so that we're not using a whole ton of barley or more to run an experiment that doesn't work out. So we generally, when we're preparing for these yeast experiments, have all sorts of buckets lined up. And I think we have got better over the years at identifying what characteristics of the wash are going to make a great spirit. So we might have ruled out that champagne yeast, which would have been the wrong thing to do, by the way, initially, had we kind of got to know that process. But I think the other interesting thing that has happened is that the yeast industry, never thought I'd say that in a sentence, but the yeast industry has evolved massively in the last 9 years. When I was going to our yeast suppliers in 2017 and asking them for weird and wonderful yeasts, they looked at me very, very oddly. And now there are wonderful suppliers like the one that Matt was talking about for Malted Teacake, who have gone all in on yeast, and they're coming up with innovative names. I mean, the yeast that we could buy back in 2017 all just had letters and numbers in their aims, and now we get to use things like Dougal Trouble and Banana Split and all sorts of other things.
I'm very excited for Banana Split when that one comes around.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, this particular one, we came from a string of we ran 4 different yeast recipes using different brewers' yeast over the space of 2 years, so 2 per year. And there's one that I'm still fascinated by, which I can't wait to release when it turns around, but it's going to be one of those brewers' yeast that takes a really long time to turn around because of that acidity again. So it was the year before the Belgian ale yeast recipe that we have here. So back in 2020, yes, that's correct. Yeah, 2020. We ran an experiment using Nc'nean, and Nc'nean is it's a group of yeast, it's a colony of yeast. It's not really one particular strain, but it's lots of different things that work symbiotically. And it's sort of a Scandinavian brewer's yeast. It's very tropical fruit forward. It's very fatty. And I remember going through these very glamorous bucket trials of tasting these different washes and getting to this one and it tasting just like orange barley squash, which was such an unusual thing to taste in what was, basically a high ABV on hopped beer at that stage. To have something that was so reminiscent of childhood and like refreshing glasses of cordial. So that made like a fascinating wash. It's made really, really good spirit. But again, it's got this like sort of high acidity that means that it's going to be good. It's just going to be good eventually. So that'll be one of the ones that we continue to test every year for the foreseeable until it's just perfect, and then we get to release it as a Huntress.
Exactly, just perfect. Do you want to talk, Matt, a little bit about our how we name our Huntress releases and what it is?
Yes,
those lovely baked goods that we can see at the bottom of the screen for those that aren't familiar with British
explaining
baked
our
delicacies.
Unusual background. So we always try with everything that we do to communicate what we feel is more important at Nc'nean. So we have the Quiet Rebel series where we talk about the person that we work with at the distillery to release their whiskey. We name the whiskey after them because we want the people that drink that whiskey to be connected to them. We want them to hear their stories and taste what they love. So that's a wonderful like story connection. But you can also use that space to build something evocative, to build something that we drink with our eyes first. So setting something up in the very first instance of saying, here's the flavor experience that we think you're going to have in drinking this whiskey. I think that's a really powerful way of getting people excited about the whiskey and finding out if there's going to be something for them before they've even opened the bottle, before they smell the whiskey. Like you can understand, yes, I love these kinds of flavors. So malted tea cake is a little bit of a combination of baked goods all jammed together, but they're reflective of the tasting notes that we found in this whiskey. So officially we put buttered toast, freshly baked cake, and fig marmalade. So there is that kind of darker fruitiness about it, but presented in this kind of light, fresh way. And then it's just very malty. It's very like grain forward and bready and mouth coating and homely and warm. So if we can find a way of reflecting those characteristics with the name of the whiskey, so before you've even picked up a bottle, you know what to expect, then that's what we aim for. That's what we'll go for. So yeah, malted tea cake was this idea of having these lovely, freshly buttered baked goods that are a little indulgent, but in a very kind of dark, rich, fruity way.
And this lovely buttered thing in front of the bottle in the picture is a malt loaf, which is very common in the UK. I don't know how common it is elsewhere, but it's given us a wonderful chance to eat lots of malt loaf as a team, which is always welcome. And
find some wonderful new flavour combinations as well.
Absolutely.
That buttered malt loaf with was it pecorino cheese? But there's like a nice sort of salty cheese. Oh my goodness. So delicious.
Sweet and salty always goes really well. And I have to say, if you get the chance, even if you can't find a malt loaf, if you can find something sweet and some cheese to go with it, it works incredibly well. And so that the malt loaf is where we get the malted bit from, and then tea cakes are the things that you can see below Matt and my pictures, which are also a classic British baked good. It's a bit more bready, got more dough in it, but it's also got those lovely raisiny, fruity notes. And yeah, it's always nice to communicate kind of flavour front and centre, we feel.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what anyone who feels confident and rapid enough in their typing, throw out some tasting notes. If you've got this whiskey in front of you and you're tasting it, were we correct? Does it live up to your experience? Did we get the right name for this particular release?
Well, Jan says he's just ordered a bottle, so let's hope we were correct. Because Derek says toast fruit loaf. I mean, spot on. Exactly.
That's exactly what we're aiming for. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the malted element to some extent is in many whiskies, because that I get that from the barley itself. And I think one of the things we like to do at Nc'nean is let the spirit shine through a bit more and not have it overly dominated by cask. So that maltiness I get quite a lot. Has anyone else got malted tea cake with them? And if so, what do you think?
Properly malty. Yes, Jim. Excellent. It seems that with the two people who have put tasting notes, we've got the two perfect answers for the name of malted tea cake. But there is one more characteristic that I bang on about every time we do any kind of Nc'nean tasting, but it's the thumbprint of our distillery, of the whiskey that we make, and that's texture. And this, it seems to have compounded even more so through the use of that slightly inefficient fermentation. You're building up more of these kind of oily, creamy, fatty compounds that make for a wonderful whiskey. They do loads of different things, so that extra texture that you're getting not only softens the mouthfeel, so it feels very soft, maybe a little sweeter, very indulgent, but it also changes the finish of the whiskey, so it makes for something that is very long lasting and full in your mouth, because physically it's a physiological reaction here. It's these oils are physically stuck to your tongue and they drag flavor along with it, making for, even in this like sort of bright, elegant style whiskey, something that is long lasting and mouth coating and full.
Derek just said there's a wonderful spicy element after the initial taste and it lingers, which I agree with. And we find that spice also in Nc'nean Organic. That's not a malted tea cake thing alone, but that lingering also comes from that lovely body and texture and mouthfeel, because it literally sticks in your mouth for longer. Okay, Matt, I've got a question for you here, because I do not know the answer to this. Are you ready?
Yeah, go for it. Oh my goodness, did you try a Kiri barrel? I, for my ignorance and sins, have never heard of such a thing. I'm tremendously sorry. I will have to.
But please, exactly. We should be Googling this afterwards. Very interesting.
I will have to now, yeah. I will search it out and we'll get back to you. But yeah, alas, exactly. I have not heard of that at all.
Great. Well, I've got an easier one now, which I'm very happy to answer from Paul, which is there a connection with the bottle pattern design to the whiskey? So we have this lovely pattern on our bottles. And I would say directly no, indirectly yes. All of the plants that are on our bottle are plants that grow locally at the distillery, and we got a lovely artist to hand paint them all. So there's heather on there, there's gorse on there are some ferns, but we also snuck in the two key components of whiskey: barley and oak. So you can also find oak leaves and barley on there. The one thing that we didn't draw was yeast, because that's quite hard to draw.
Well, technically, there's all those leaves there. They are almost definitely.
Well, they've all got yeast on them. Exactly. The yeast is there in spirit, at least. But I guess what it's meant to represent is two things. One is the place that we are. All of these plants grow around the distillery. And the second is our kind of commitment to the environment and keeping those plants in tip-top condition. We have got, I think, a few more questions here. Sven, yes, we will be bringing this to Nuremberg if it hasn't already sold out. But yes, definitely it will be there. So Jim says, I guess you must have some 8-year-old cask stuff now. Actually 9-year-old, because we're in 2026 and we started in March 2017. So we've passed our 9-year birthday. And we are already actually bringing in those older casks to our releases, not malted tea cake that we're talking about tonight, but to lots of our other releases have older whiskey in Nc'nean Organic, which is our flagship. We mix casks of different ages because they all bring different characteristics. The younger casks tend to have a bit more brightness and life about them. The older casks can bring a bit more depth. And of course, next year we will have 10-year spirit, and so we are busy pondering what we might do next year. And that might involve this long maturation recipe that we've been working on and distilling every year since 2017. Quite what that form takes, we haven't yet decided, but it's a big thing on mine and Matt's project list for this year, and very exciting.
Yes, that will be very fun to work on. The arduous task of searching through the oldest casks in the Nc'nean warehouse and tasting them all to see if they're delicious yet or not. It's a terrible job.
And Jim also says, do you prefer older or younger? And I think you can't. I think that's impossible to answer. I think they're different, so it depends a bit on what style of whiskey we're looking to create. On a personal level, it kind of depends on the occasion. But I think both Matt and I love the life and the verve and the brightness that you get from younger whiskies. Doesn't mean it has to be 3 years old, but a 5, a 6, a 7, or an 8-year-old cask. If you compare that to the other extreme of, let's say, a 25-year-old, I think probably both of us would come down on the younger profile. But also every cask is unique, and that within the warehouse you find all sorts of different profiles in there.
Yeah, like broadly in my tastings, normally if we're making just a batch of flagship Nc'nean, I'll have around 100 or so casks to taste that will be of the widest possible range of ages that we have available to us. So there'll be some 3-year-old stuff in there, there'll be some 9-year-old stuff in there, and I think a lot of the tastings and personal preference for me just comes down to finding outliers within that section. So finding those phenomenally well-rounded, creamy, fruity 3-year-olds, and then finding those exceptionally decadent and spiced and full 9-year-olds. Like that's always fun. So I don't have a particular preference for age. It's just a preference for finding what's exceptional within its bracket and doing its own job.
There's some great chat about Huntress tea cakes here. So I have to apologise that this is not the kind of tea cake we're talking about, but I can assure you it took a lot of airtime when we were deciding the name and whether it was confusing to be called a tea cake but not a Huntress or not. But Derek, I agree. There is a hint of caramel wafer, so we've kind of at least gone in that Huntress direction, even if not fully to the tea cake.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure the brand team would be very happy if we'd
no, exactly, stolen the Huntress tea cake.
Red and silver striped the packaging. Yeah,
would be fun though. Drambu says, will there be a special release for the West Highland Festival in June? And the answer is yes. So for those of you who don't know, along with Tobermory, Ardnamurchan and Oban, we are launching a new whiskey festival this year, which is called the West Highland Whiskey Festival. It's in the middle of June, and it's a 4-day festival with 1 day at each distillery. We're going to be the first day, the 18th of June, then it's Ardnamurchan, then Tobermory, then Oban. So if any of you are around, please do come and join. The tickets are free, but they do need to be booked. And I think that's the same for every distillery. You can just book on each individual distillery's website. And yes, we will have a special single cask release for the festival. And it is actually part of our artist series. So our normal single casks are released under the Nc'nean series. Nc'nean means one in Gaelic. And they are distinguished by the number, which is the cask number and the year. But we have also been working on this artist series where we feature an artist on the front of the bottle. We first released one of these in Germany at Whiskey Live, but we are doing one for the Whiskey Festival in June. And this is a particularly special one because we actually have an artist that resides just below the distillery. So the distillery is pretty close to the sea, but between the distillery and the sea is an amazing artist called Alan Heyman, and we will be featuring one of his artworks on the front of the bottle. So that will be lovely, and it is a delicious whiskey.
And it's a very pretty label and piece of art as well. I've got very lucky to see the mock-ups of what's to come. It looks gorgeous.
Exactly. Oh, Derek, that's is that info about? Derek says that getting info from Alden Merkin is difficult. Is that about the West Highland Whiskey Festival, or is that a different time? And I'm happy to help offline as well. If that would be helpful.
Yes, drop us an email on hello@nc'nean.com, and I am sure we can open up some path of communication to help you.
Exactly. Or maybe even give you the answer if it's about the festival. If it's not about the festival, we'll just beat Ardner Merkin into shape. Well, does anyone else have any questions? Any other tasting notes you want to share? While you're all thinking about that, I have really appreciated how many different nationalities are represented on here this evening.
It's very cool.
And to preempt the questions that we might get about where Nc'nean Malted Teacake is available, this little QR code that is over there is a link to our UK website. So for those of you who are in Scotland, which is lots of people, you can buy from there. You can also buy from retailers in the UK. Kirsch, who's our distributor in Scotland, should have stock of this. So for those of you in Germany, I say in Scotland, sorry, in Germany, Kirsch is our distributor in Germany. They have lots of stock, so go seek that out in your lovely local retailer. I noticed someone, I was here from the US. It is en route to the US. It is on the sea. So hopefully it will be available in retailers and on our US website in kind of June time. We're just waiting for final info on that. But I have bad news for Norway and Bulgaria, which is unfortunately, Malted Teacake is not going to be available there. But if you travel to Scotland, you can pick it up there. A few other questions come in here. You have got Quiet Rebels Annabel. I've got Quiet Rebels Annabel there as well. The talk I finished.
I think I've got a Quiet Rebels Annabel somewhere down here hiding.
The Tokai finish, actually, honestly, because I love Tokai wine. That was the really simple reasoning behind that. I love Tokai wine. It can be quite challenging barrels to work with, but I think we pulled it off in the case of Quiet Rebels Annabel.
Yeah, particularly pernicious cask type to work with, and they work really well for how we use them in those sort of short finishes that give it a lot more kind of resiny sweetness and a big brightness as well. And then they also work exceptionally well in the long term because it's Hungarian oak. Hungarian oak is really tannic, and those tannins can develop and mature into this wonderful kind of ethereal, perfumed style of whiskey. So very, very good at opposite ends of the spectrum, and then very unusual in the middle because you get the combination of the intensity of the sweet wine and the high tannins before they're broken down, and can be tricky, can be difficult. So we've got them at just the right moment for Quiet Rebels Annabel to exist and be this my favorite tasting notes that I think I've ever written for the company of the Italian pastry shop. Orange blossom water, desiccated coconut, pastries, like very top note and complex and delightful.
Brilliant. Okay, one more here. On our own casks, yes, the first number is the year of distilling. So you'll see an own cask where it's called something like own 17415. That means it's cask 415 from the year 2017. Mike, I think I mentioned that, but yes, it will definitely be available in the US, just not yet. Drambu, I love the fact that you have Nc'nean in Bulgaria. That is news to me. Always good.
Please message us and tell us where the bar is.
Yeah, exactly. We're there.
We will be there.
Exactly. Paul, great to hear that you've got one. That's awesome. I hope you really enjoy it. And Marcus is sitting with an ex-rye cask oon. That one was a very good one.
Yeah, those rye casks were good fun. I think we only bought 5 in total for different applications and uses, because they're a very well. It was again, it's another experiment for us, but in this case, finding out how that kind of root spice intensity works with our spirit. And it turns out very, very well. And I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Great. All right. Well, should we call it a night, Matt, and say Sanjivar?
Sanjivar.
Great to have you all with us. Thanks so much for joining. It's been awesome. And to those of you who watch back later, thanks for coming to see us. I hope you all love Huntress Malted Teacake when you get to try it if you haven't got it already. And look forward to seeing some of you at least at the West Highland Whisky Festival in June.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Goodbye. Good night.